We're going to talk about one of Jesus' names this morning. But I want to tell you first a little bit about me. In 93, 94, I was in 8th grade. Some of you were not alive yet, and that's okay. I know I'm getting older, and that's a good thing to a point. But I had the opportunity. It was my second year to be a part of a team. I was on a swim team, okay? And I was just getting to the point where I started actually contributing to the team. I swam the breaststroke, the distance breaststroke, and I was probably the second or third fastest kid on our team, and really took a lot of pride in what I was doing. There's something about being part of a team and contributing that makes us feel special, and it makes us feel like we're worth something. Well, it was towards the end of our swim season, and I got to the pool, and I noticed that the fastest kid in our event was not there that day. And I'm looking around, and I'm like, oh man, where's Jimmy at? Like, Jimmy's not here. My coach came up to me and said, hey, Billy, Jimmy's sick today. We really need you to step up. It's going to be a close meet. I've looked at their times. We're really, really close. And I started getting excited. My heat was towards the end of the swim meet there. And, I was kind of amped up. I was getting there, right? So he comes to me right before I'm about to go up there. And we're looking at the scoreboard. And I can see it's really close. And he talks to me. And he says, listen, all you need to do is place. Don't get disqualified. Don't get in your own head. Just swim your race. Even if you swim your worst time of the year so far, you're going to place in this race. Swim your race and do it. And I took those words, and I was like, these are gold. Like, I was like, these are words of wisdom here. I am hearing something that I need to hold on to right now. And I got up to that starting block there. And all of my friends started doing something. They started chanting my name. And they were like, Billy, Billy, Billy. And the adrenaline's really going now. And I'm thinking to myself, place? I ain't going to place. I'm winning this race. You can't stop me. And I got on that block there, and it was back in the day where you could still use a starter pistol. They had a starter pistol, and that gun went off, and you would have thought that I was a bullet shot out of that gun. I dove in the water as far and as hard as I could. I swam as fast as I could, and I remember at the end of the race, I hit both hands on the timer, and I came up out of the water, and I looked left, and I looked right, and I had finished first. And I was so excited. I was so stoked. I was like, yes, I did it. I'm part of the team. I contributed. I'm the hero. I won the race for us. And I looked up to my coach, expecting to see joy and pride. And instead I saw disappointment and frustration. He said 3 words to me. You got disqualified. It may not seem like a big deal to you. To an 8th grader who's not 5 foot tall yet, 80 pounds soaking wringing wet, not real comfortable with my own body image at that point, it was devastating. I looked at all of my teammates. They were all upset with me. They were all mad. I felt alone, abandoned, like no one cared. My friends actually started to shun me. I lost a lot of friends. I started to get made fun of, as if I didn't have enough reasons to be made fun of already, being the short, skinny kid in Philadelphia. But it was hard. I got to tell you guys, as an 8th grader, it probably was the lowest point in my school career that I can remember. I remember that feeling of of rejection. We're in the book of Exodus here, and we're studying through here, and our sermon title for this part of Exodus here, our sermon series title here is Prone to Wander. And our hearts are fickle. Our hearts are so prone to grab onto things here. And what we're going to talk about this morning is we're going to recap kind of what Pastor Dennis talked about last week, that Moses is dealing with a group of people who they grumble, they complain. God has done so much for them. He brought them out of Egypt. They come out of Egypt and they're wandering around and there's no food. And they start to complain and they say things to Moses like, "Did you bring us out into the desert just to have us die? We should go back to Egypt." They get food and then there's like, "Hey, there's no water." And then at the end of chapter 17 here, we have a battle where some pagans come in and they see a group of people that are hungry, probably thirsty. They don't know that they've gotten food. They don't know that they've gotten water from God. But they see an opportunity to take advantage of what they perceive to be a weak people. And Moses does something. He sees the armies coming, and Moses realizes something real quick. And it's that he can't do it alone. So he calls Joshua, and he says, "Joshua, listen, you need to literally rally the troops. Okay, I need an army. You need to raise up an army, and they need to go fight for me, for God." And Moses says, "I'm going up on the hill there, and I'm going to keep my arms in the air, and as long as my arms are in the air, we will prevail." And he keeps his arms in the air, but like most human beings here, if we kept our arms in the air for too long, we would get tired. Two men go up, they make some rocks, they make a seat for Moses, and they hold his arms up in the air. And every time Moses' arms start to fall down, the armies of the Lord start to lose. But as long as he keeps them in the air, the army wins. And at the end of the day, they win the day. And what God proves to his people is that I will take care of your food. I will take care of your water. I will take care of your protection. Just as I brought you out of Egypt, I will sustain you through the wilderness. And then we come to chapter 18. And I really feel like Moses is at a high point here. He's just been through some tremendous things here, but we're going to see something today. And you can put up that next slide here. I had AI create me a picture here, all right? I didn't draw this myself. You'll see the bottom is covered there. For some reason, AI put like too many hands. It was really weird. It was kind of freaky looking, so I kind of covered it up with like a comic book motif here. But in Exodus chapter 18, here's what we're going to discover. We are going to discover that when the Lord is the hero of the story, love abounds, lives are changed, and leaders are humble. Throughout this entire chapter, that's what we're going to see, is that God is the hero of the story here. So we are dealing with a story, a narrative, and in a narrative, a historical narrative, characters are important. And we start off in Exodus chapter 18, verse 1. It says, "Now Jethro, the priest of Midian and father-in-law of Moses, heard everything God had done for Moses and for the people of Israel, and how the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt." All right, so we get a character here. His name's Jethro. Okay, we've seen him before. He's the father-in-law of Moses. It says 13 times in this chapter that he's the father-in-law. Probably important for a reason. We'll dig into that a little bit. But he is a priest of Midian. Well, where is Midian? Go ahead and put the map up here. We had this map last week here. We know that the people of God are down at the bottom here by Mount Sinai. Midian is on the other side of the Persian Gulf. So to your right there, right where it says traditional route of the Exodus, that's about where Midian is. It's modern-day Iran. And what we learn here from this first verse here is that it's not that long after they've left Egypt. But word has already spread over the Persian Gulf of what God is doing. This is going to be a theme throughout the entire Old Testament until we enter into the promised land here. The Word of God, the power of God spreading and going before them, and people hearing and being afraid of God. Because our God is big, He is strong. His stories are worthy to be told. And we find this priest of Midian who hears the story here. He hears two things about the story. He hears what God has done for Moses, and he hears what God has done for Israel there. 3 times in these first 7 verses here, we're going to hear how great our God is and the story of what he did here. Verse 2 says, after Moses had sent his wife Zipporah to his father-in-law, Jethro received her. Now again, we're dealing with a narrative here, okay? We have to kind of take this story and we have to ask ourselves a few questions. Why is it worded this way? Why does Moses send his wife? Why does Jethro receive his wife and his 2 sons here? Why are we getting these 2 words, send and receive here? What do we send and receive? We send messages, right? We text all the time. This is an Old Testament text message. I think it is. I think Moses is sending a message to his father-in-law. We have to ask ourselves, though, what is the message that he's sending? Well, here it is in verse 3. Her and her 2 sons, one was named Gershom, for Moses said, I have become a foreigner in a foreign land. And the other's name was Eleazar, for he said, my father's God was my helper. He saved me from the sword of Pharaoh. What does Moses say? Moses says, I'm sending you that which is most precious to me. My wife and my 2 sons. And we get the names of his 2 sons and what they mean. Again, as a reader of this, we have to ask ourselves, why is God telling us the meaning of their names? Why is that important for us as readers here? Well, what does Moses start off saying? By the first name of his son. I was a foreigner in a foreign land. I think what he's saying is, I was a wanderer. I was lost. I had no direction. You think about Moses' life. Does that not describe who he was before the burning bush? What's the name of his second son? His second son is Eleazar, for he said, my father's God is my helper. He saved me from the sword of Pharaoh. I think the message that Moses is sending to his father-in-law is that I once was lost, but God found me. I think those 2 statements can sum up the entire life of Moses over and over again. Think about it, guys. When Moses was a baby, what did Pharaoh try to do to all the babies in Egypt, all the Hebrew babies? Kill them, right? How did God spare Moses? Well, he had his mom put him in a basket and float him down the river. You want to talk about a foreigner in a foreign land? You put a baby in a basket and send it down the river. Babies aren't meant to be in baskets floating down the river. God supernaturally spares Moses' life for some reason. Moses grows up in Pharaoh's house, right? Grows up in Pharaoh's house. 40 years later, he decides that he sees his people being oppressed, the Hebrews being oppressed, and he decides he's going to take matters into his own hands. He sees one of his Hebrew brothers being beaten. And what does he do? He kills the Egyptian that's beating him. People start to find out about it. Moses goes to his Hebrew brothers, and his Hebrew brothers, what do? They reject him. And now he thinks, oh no, I'm in big trouble. And he flees to Midian. God protects him in fleeing because Pharaoh sought to kill him for him killing an Egyptian. Moses then, 40 years later, is called back to Egypt. 10 plagues, right? Pharaoh says, get out of here. after the Passover, after the firstborn of all of Egypt is killed. He says, get out. Pharaoh has a change of heart, though. He sees these people leaving and he gets upset. And what does he do? He comes after them to kill them. They're stuck up against the sea here. And what does God do? God parts the sea and again spares Moses' life. See, our God is a God of no mistakes. He may have named his children this years before these events. Some of these events actually happened. But God knew that this would be the testimony of Moses. That Moses was not the hero of his own story, that God was. So who is just Jethro here? We know he's the priest of Midian. We know who Moses is. We know he's called by God. But this priest of Midian, at the very least, I will tell you guys today, based on verse 11 that we're going to read here, he's a little confused. I'm not going to say that he is not a follower of Yahweh totally, but I do think there is something in this man Midian that he's holding back. I don't know if it's, hey, Moses told me about Yahweh, or the fact that Genesis chapter 25, verses 1 and 2, you guys can read it up there. But we find out that who Midian was? Midian was a descendant of Abraham. After Sarah, Abraham's wife, died, he took another wife, and Midian is one of the children. What do we learn that Abraham does with Isaac and all of the rest of the children he has? Abraham separates them out. And unfortunately, if you were to look at that list, all of those individuals turned to idols, false gods, fornication, sin. They all turned away from God. And we have this individual who is a priest of Midian. I think at the very least, Moses knows that his father-in-law is confused about who Yahweh is. And listen, we need to throw Jethro a bone here. Okay? We've read through Exodus. You tell me one perfect person that we've seen other than God himself in this entire story. Jethro's got issues. Moses has issues. You have issues. I ain't got any issues. No, I got more issues than probably all of you guys. We all bring baggage to the table. This is one of the things that Jethro brings to the table here. He's not quite all in yet. Moses says something, though, specific in the naming of his children. He does say, my father's God. Now, that could be referring to his biological father. It could be referring to the God of Jacob, or the God of Isaac, or the God of Abraham. And I do think in his message to his father-in-law, he's trying to make that connection, that you are still a child of Abraham. I think Moses is reaching out to his father-in-law here. So verse 5 says, Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, together with Moses, his son, and his wife, came into the wilderness, where they camped near the mountain of God. Jethro had sent word to him, I, your father-in-law Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and your 2 sons. I want you guys to see the respect that these 2 men have for each other. Moses, again, sends that which is most precious to him. And how does Jethro respond here? Jethro could have said, hey, I'm coming back with my daughter and my grandchildren. But what Jethro says instead, I'm coming back with your wife and her children. Jethro makes a distinction here, that he knows that these individuals are no longer in his care, that they're under the care and protection of Moses here. I think when Moses sends them here, he's showing them, listen, not only did God deliver me, not only did God deliver Israel, God completely protected our family through this. I didn't lose your daughter. I didn't lose your grandkids. Everything that I went in with, God protected and he brought out. It wasn't that I was strong enough, Jethro. It wasn't that I was man enough. It wasn't that I did everything that I could to protect them. It's the Lord God who protected them. See, when God is the hero of our story, we get a reunion like we're about to see here. When God is the hero of our story, verse 6 happens. Jethro had sent word to him, I, your father-in-law Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and your 2 sons. Again, there's no indication that when Moses sends this message that he expects Jethro to come. I think Jethro wants to see it for himself. I think he hears something exciting happen, and he wants to see it for himself. Guys, when I was candidating here, I'm just going to hop into modern times here. I heard what was happening at Steamtown Church, and before I even came to candidate, I came to visit. You know why? Because I wanted to see what was happening. I wanted to see what God was doing here at Steamtown Church. I think Jethro is the same way here. I think he wants to see it. I think something exciting has happened, and he wants to be a part of it here. Verse 7 says, so Moses went out to meet his father-in-law. He bowed down and he kissed them. Okay? They greeted each other and then went into the tent. Now, again, we have a cultural custom here, okay? I am not much of a hugger. I am definitely, I can almost guarantee you, not going to kiss anyone other than my wife and my kids in this room. Okay, that's just me. All right, that's just me. And it's a cultural thing here. Okay, these 2 men love each other. And again, this is what happens when God is when God is the hero of your story. Love abounds here. Now we've had COVID and some other things here, and we don't tend to be as touchy-feely as we used to be or whatever. We have different ways of telling each other we're excited to see each other. Different ways of saying, hey, you're my, you're my what? What's up, brother, right? You're my brother, right? Half of you have no idea what that is. The other half, just turn to somebody who's under 30 years old and you'll know what's up, brother. But again, there are cultural things that define us, that say, hey, listen, we're connected in some way. We're connected in some way, right? There's these social cues that we take here, but we see Moses and his father-in-law Jethro, and we see how much love that there is between them. What's the first thing that Moses does after they enter the tent? Well, verse 8 says, Moses told his father-in-law about everything the Lord had done to Pharaoh and the Egyptians for Israel's sake, about the hardships they met along the way, and how the Lord had saved them. This is the 3rd time that the story points to God being the hero. I'm going to tell you guys, if anybody had a right in this story, humanly speaking, to say that they were the hero of the story, it was Moses. I mean, listen, Moses went from 0 to hero. Okay, he was the ultimate underdog story here. Okay, he should have died by all accounts as a baby. Time and time again, everyone he came in contact with, except one Midianite priest. But everybody who Moses comes in contact with, you know what they do initially? They reject him. They reject him and abandon him. This man, Jethro, is the first one that accepts Moses into his house. Moses shares the good news of the power of God with the man who accepted him when he was at his lowest point. The question we have to ask ourselves is, who is the hero of the story? Well, it isn't Jethro. It isn't Moses. It's the Lord. That's the only conclusion we can come to with the way that the writer chose to write this. By the way, the writer of this is Moses himself. Moses has a message not only for his father-in-law, he has a message for all of us. And that is, the Lord is the hero of this story. The next question we have to wrestle with is, who is the hero of your story? I'm going to tell you, if it's anything other than the conclusion that Moses comes to, you're in trouble. It's very easy for us to be so inwardly focused with our own wants, desires, needs, getting our own way. And we are prone to think of ourselves as the hero of our story. Now, don't get me wrong, guys, okay? There's little things that happen in my life that make me feel really good and almost make me feel like a hero sometimes. We're not having any more kids, right, Julie? Where are you at? You're in the back somewhere. We're not having any more kids. But I have to tell you, when I would come home from work and my kids were still little, and they'd be like, Daddy! They'd come running as fast as they could, and they hugged me. I felt like a hero. I was like, yes, I have worked today. I have provided for my family. I'm Superman. Let's wrestle on the ground, And Julie would come in, stop roughhousing. I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm having a good time. When Julie goes to ladies' Bible study or goes out for the night and doesn't ask me to do anything, and I'm like, hey, there's some dishes that need to be done. And I look at those dishes and I'm like, kids, wash the dishes. No, I'm like, you know what? Roll up my sleeves and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to wash the dishes here. And she comes home and she goes, oh, you washed the dishes? And I'm like, yeah, it was a tough job. Somebody had to do it. It makes me feel good. Like, that makes me feel good here. You know what? Moses could have been like, yeah, you know what? Pharaoh was sitting in his throne room there, and I went in and I said, hey, buddy, you let my people go. And he was like, whatever you say, Moses. No, he doesn't tell that story. He tells the story of how difficult it was, how hard it was, how from a human perspective, there's no way any of this should have happened. If human beings were striving on their own for this, it would have never come to anything. But if God is the hero of the story, anything is possible. And what does he share with his father-in-law who he loves? He shares the good news of what God has done. Again, if anybody had the right, it was Moses to toot his own horn. A thousand years later at the time of Christ, if you turn to John chapter 6, poor Moses, he can't even get away from it after he dies. In John chapter 6, verse 30, it says, so they asked him, what happened was Jesus had just fed 5,000 people, much like manna was provided for the millions of people in the wilderness there. But Jesus provides food for 5,000 miraculously, and these people follow him. And guess what they want? They want some more food. So, verse 30, when they asked him, what sign will you give that we may see it and believe you? What will you do? Our ancestors, they give him a suggestion. Our ancestors ate manna in the wilderness, as it is written. He gave them bread from heaven to eat. That he there, guys, is not referring to God, but it should be. Jesus, knowing their heart, says verse 32 here, Jesus said to them, very truly, I tell you, it is not Moses who has given you the bread from heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is the bread that comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. Guys, the book of Hebrews would talk about the fact that Moses looked forward to something greater than himself. He could see the fact that God's story of redemption was bigger than him. And I got to tell you guys, the story of Exodus is probably the greatest redemption story that we have in the Old Testament as far as a narrative goes. That God would rescue his people from bondage and slavery. But Moses looks forward to someone else. The book of Hebrews basically says this, that Jesus is the hero of the entire story of redemption. If you are here today and you think you're your own hero, and you were to leave here today and not make it across the street, and you died and faced God, and you went there and you said, hey, Lord, guess what? I lived a pretty good life. I took care of my family. I took care of my kids. People look up to me. I gave to the poor. I went to church on Sunday. I was coming from church when I got hit by this car. you'd find yourself exactly like I was in 8th grade coming up out of the water. Disappointed and disqualified. Unfortunately, without Christ being the hero of your story, that's how you're living right now. Disappointed and disqualified. If you're looking to any man to save you, any woman to save you, any saint to save you, at the end of your life, you're going to wind up disqualified, disappointed. That's the hope that you have. No hope at all. You're just like me. You're frustrated. You're dejected. You feel abandoned and alone. I've been there, guys. It's not a fun place to be. The truth is this, that salvation is only found in one name, and his name is Jesus. He truly is the hero of our story, and he is the only hero that is qualified to take on sin and death, to redeem our souls. We have to see Jethro's response here. Verse 9. Jethro hears all this twice. He was delighted to hear about the good news that the Lord, actually he hears about it 3 times. Jethro was delighted to hear about the good things that God had done for Israel in rescuing them from the hand of the Egyptians. He said, praise the Lord who rescued you, Moses, from the hand of the Egyptians and of Pharaoh, and who rescued the people from the hand of the Egyptians. And here is verse 11. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all other gods, for he did this to those who treated Israel arrogantly. Jethro makes a statement here. He says, hey, I live in Midian. There's a lot of gods in Midian. I know about the gods of Egypt, and I saw what your God did to the gods of Egypt. And now I can say, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that your Lord is the hero. That all other gods are worthless compared to him. This is where our heart needs to be. Each and every one of us. We may not carve an idol, okay? We may not sit it up here and then all take turns bowing down to it. We do have idols in our life as Americans. Some of our idols are easy to spot, right? Money. Easy idol, right? Easy idol to spot. Pride. Yeah, pretty easy. There's a worse one, though, that I feel like we fall into, and that's comfort, security, safety. We want everyone safe. We want to provide for everyone. We want to be the hero of our story. And God's saying, no. What else does Jethro do? Verse 12. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and other sacrifices to God, and Aaron with all the elders came to eat a meal with Moses' father-in-law in the presence of God. Jethro says, hey, I'm all in. A burnt offering, there's nothing left. I'm giving the very best of what I have to God, and I'm not expecting anything in return. I'm putting it all on the altar, God, but so many times in our own life, we think we have to hold something back, or we try to keep something back. Jethro says, I've been there, where I've been keeping things back. It doesn't work. It's either all or nothing. He breaks bread and enjoys a fellowship with now other followers of Yahweh. So how has the hero changed your life? We see Jethro here. We see Jethro make a profound statement, and then his actions back up his statement. How has the hero changed your life? Well, let me tell you how the hero changed my life. At my lowest point after the swim meet, again, in the grand scheme of things, I'm probably the only one that remembers this swim meet, okay? My coach was also my uncle, He's no longer with us. He died just about a year. I know you're laughing, but he doesn't remember, okay? There's nobody who probably remembers that I lost the swim meet for us. I don't know if I mentioned that, but we did lose the swim meet, and it was my fault. But I was at my lowest point. My dad started going to a church, a weird church. These people, they met for like an hour and a half. They sang songs to God that were not just like monotone. There were instruments there. It was really weird. And then when it was over, everybody like hung around. They all hung around and like talked to each other. And I was like, oh man, this church is weird. It's like they don't know how to do church. You do church like a half hour and then you're gone. You don't hang around and talk to people. But we kept going to this church, and there was a young man there who saw this nerdy-looking kid from Philly who didn't have a lot to offer. And he welcomed me into his friend group. And I want to tell you this. The more I learned about Christ, the more I learned about followers of Christ and what they should look at, the more I examined this individual's life. And do you know what I found? I found out he wasn't perfect. I found out that there were areas that he was lacking. But I knew there was something different about him. I knew he looked more like Christ than I did. I knew I was missing something. I knew that my best friend in 8th grade, Todd Johnson, who's now a pastor down in Delaware, I knew that he wasn't perfect. And I would find out that he didn't have to be. Because the hero that he was following was. Guys, this is our story. You know what? We're not perfect. We're going to fail. We don't accept that failure. It's not just like, well, guess everybody sins. No, it breaks our heart. But are we looking to the hero of the story, or are we just trying to be better and do more? That's not the message here. The message is to look to God, who's the hero. Jesus changed my life. He became the hero of my story. I cried out to God. I said, God, I've been trying to do it on my own for so long. Only you can save me. You need to be the hero that comes in. Only you were worthy to die for my sins. And that's the truth of the gospel and the truth of redemption here. We're going to finish up quickly here. We've learned so far that when God is the God of the story, or when God is the hero of the story here, that love abounds, that lives are changed. But then we're going to see that sometimes there's issues. Verse 13 says, the next day, Moses took his seat to serve as judge for the people, and they stood around him from morning to evening. When his father-in-law saw all that Moses was doing for the people, he said, what is it you are doing for the people? Why do you sit alone and judge, while all these people stand around you from morning till evening? I got to tell you, Jethro he's a smart guy. Okay, he's a smart guy. He's wise. Okay, he doesn't just come out of the tent and make a snap judgment here. It says that he watched Moses from morning till evening do this. And he kind of sat back. You know, maybe got some chicken wings, something, I don't know. He's sitting, maybe some manna. He didn't have chicken wings. Maybe he's got some manna, some water from the rock. You know, he's chilling and he's watching. And he's like, hey, what's going on here? But look at Jethro's tone. Moses, what are you doing? Why are you sitting alone? Why are you doing this? See, he may have been the hero of the story yesterday. And I think that's what Jethro is telling him. Moses, you just spent the whole day yesterday telling me how much God is the hero of the story. Stop being the hero. Like right now, it looks like you're the hero. Moses answered in 15, and I think he's proud of his answer here. He says, because all the people come to me and seek God's will. Whenever they have a dispute, it is brought to me, and I decide between the parties and inform them of God's decree and instructions. Moses is like, doing my job. Just following the leader here. That's what I do. I judge all the people that come to me. I solve everybody's problem. All the millions of people come to me. And in a tone only a father-in-law could give. Verse 17, Moses' father-in-law replied, "What you are doing is not good." Moses is like, "What? What do you mean it's not good? I'm the man. Like, I'm the guy. This is what I'm doing. Like, this is how we operate." Verse 18, "You and these people who come to you will only wear yourselves out. The work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle it alone." How many of you guys go to the grocery store? You guys go, some of you DoorDash or Uber Eats, whatever. I still go to the grocery store. You know, when I go to the grocery store, I look for the longest line to stand in. I don't look for it. I usually find it, though. But, you know, nobody wants to wait around. See, the frustration here is not only for Moses, that he's going to be overburdened and overworked. The frustration is for the people. There's no way from morning to evening that Moses is getting through every dispute. Oh, his tent is too close to mine. Oh, he didn't move the rocks, you know, from over here. They stole my sheep. You know, whatever the dispute is, he's figuring out all of it. And Jethro says, "No, you got it all wrong, buddy." Verse 19, "Listen to me and I will give you some advice, and may God be with you. You must be the people's representative before God and bring their disputes to Him." What's Moses supposed to do? Talk to God. What do we call talking to God? It's an easy one. Praying, right? Prayer. Moses, pray. Bring the needs of the people to God. Verse 20, "Teach them His decrees and instructions." Well, this is an easy one. Moses, teach the people. What's the third thing you're supposed to do? "And show them the way they are to live and how they are to behave." What does Jethro tell Moses to do? Pray for the people, teach them, and there's a third thing he tells them to do. And I believe it's this: equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. What does Moses sound like? What does his job sound like? Does it sound like a judge? No. You know what it sounds like? A pastor. What do the apostles say in the book of Acts? "We will devote ourselves to prayer and the study of God's word." What does Paul tell Timothy to do? He tells him to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. This is the advice that Jethro gives his son-in-law here. We continue on in verse 21, "But select capable men from all the people." Wait a minute, there's a problem? Moses is supposed to select capable men? Does this not sound like Acts and the choosing of deacons? "Who fear God, trustworthy men who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Have them serve as judge for the people at all times, but have them bring every difficult case to you. The simple cases they will decide for themselves, that will make your load lighter, because they will share it with you. If you do this, and God so commands, you will be able to stand the strain of all these people, and all these people will go home satisfied." We do have more to cover here, but I'm going to wrap it up at this point here, because what you need to know is that Moses humbles himself and does exactly what his father-in-law tells him to do. Moses is a humble leader, but Jethro says you're going to feel the strain. I'm going to put my new pastor hat on here for a second, okay? And I'm going to ask you to be gracious with me. On any given Sunday, we have about 400 people come through our doors, okay? In talking with your pastors and your elders, we feel the strain of that. It is a heavy load. Lance, right? Lance is a visitor here today. Lance said, man, there's a lot of people here. I said, we're going to talk about that this morning. Guys, it's a burden. Not that you're a burden on us, it's just the amount of people here. Pastor Jason, he doesn't have to be your hero. Pastor Dennis, he doesn't have to be your hero. I don't have to be your hero. Pastor Marcelo doesn't have to be your hero. One of the things that I've observed in my Jethro hat, if I can put it on here, is that we have over 400 people coming to church on any given Sunday here between all of our services. And we have less than 200 members. I came here because I was excited about what God was doing. And God is working through Jason and Dennis and Marcelo and your elders and those who are serving you. But I'm going to tell you guys, the burden gets heavy. Some of you need to move from consuming what happens here on Sunday to co-laboring with us. And you say to me, Billy, how do I do that? How do I get involved? I want to help. I see heads shaking. Yes, help, please. Here's how you can help. Step 1, recognize that Jesus is the hero of your story. If you're not a follower of Jesus Christ, I'm sorry, you can't help. If you haven't given your life to Jesus Christ, if He is not the Lord of your life, you can't help here. We can help you find the way. That's our mission. That's our job, to make more and better disciples of Jesus Christ. But if you're not there yet, that's your first step. And for some of you, it needs to happen this morning. You're part of that first step there after you're done, and you proclaim that Jesus is the hero of your story. You need to tell your story that way. You weren't smart enough. You weren't good enough. Jesus is the hero of your story. You want a great way to proclaim to everybody that Jesus is the way of your story? Guess what you can do? You can go get baptized after you recognize that Jesus is a part of your story. Step 2 in that process, then you can get plugged in here. You say to me, Billy, how do I get plugged in? House churches. Start attending one of our house churches. Start doing life together with our people. Start growing in Christ. We had a house church meeting, leader meeting last night, and we launched this initiative. And you know what the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to tell the story of God to each other. What God has done in our life, how He is the hero. Then we're going to discover how God has gifted us and how we can more effectively minister to each other and to this world and to where God has called us. We want to look more like Christ each and every day. You want to take it a step further? And here's where I'm going to meddle. If you know Jesus and you've been baptized and you've been attending here for more than a year, you need to get to a membership class. Here's the honest truth, guys. There's too many. Too many regular attenders sitting in the seats here for our team to be able to effectively minister and care for the needs of each and every one of you. We need you to enter into a covenant relationship with us. That together, we're going to do what God has called us to do in Scranton. South Side and West Side, when God moves in this church, and Lord willing, we open our 3rd, our 4th, our 5th campus here. How many of you will be sitting in the seats here saying, man, the opportunity to be a part of something great that God was doing, not that Dennis was doing or Jason or the elders of Steamtown Church, but that God was doing. That's why I'm here. Here. You have to ask yourself that question. I don't mean to meddle, but I do. You know why? Because God is the God of my story. I know I can't change you. I know I can't fix you, but I do love you. When God is the God of the hero of the story, love abounds. Lives are changed, and that's what I see here. But then thirdly, leaders are humble. Guys, you got some humble leaders here. Do we need to work on things? We do. But I can tell you right now, Jason doesn't want to build his church. Dennis doesn't want to build his church. I definitely don't want my church. Marcelo doesn't want to build his church. The elders don't want to build our church. We can't. It's too heavy for us. Guys, I want you to partner with us. Let's pray together here. I know we didn't finish the chapter. God, you are the hero of our story. God, the burden is great, and we feel the strain. God, bring co-laborers alongside of us. Lord, if there is an individual here today that has not trusted you as Savior, God, and they want to take that first step today, God, I would just ask that you would move in their heart. God, that it wasn't with persuasive speech or anything like that, but it's with your word that you are calling them today, Lord, to be a follower of you. God, that lives are changed because you are the hero. That love abounds because you're the hero. God, that we do not exalt ourselves in any way. God, but we look to you. Lord, as we continue on here together, God, if someone is here today and this is the decision they want to make, please allow them to be brave and bold enough, Lord, to approach someone and say, hey, I need help. I need help. I need Jesus. I can't do it on my own anymore. God, I ask for those who have been attending. Lord, I know they see the great things that you are doing here. God, I know they've heard the stories several times. God, my prayer is that they would take the next step in faith, Lord, that they would seek to be plugged in here. God, that they would seek to get involved. Lord, that they would be baptized. God, that they would become members. Lord, that they would join us in this burden together, arm in arm, following hard after you, not working as hard as we can, Lord, in our own strength, but because you are God. God, I thank you for your word. Lord, I thank you that it has the power to produce love in the hearts of your followers, to change our lives, God, and Lord, to make us humble. God, we give you all the glory in your precious name.